It's always a challenge to come back and present on the same subject again and again. As most of you know, retirement has always been a passionate subject. Selfish motive is try and get top of mind recall for the brand, for the business, but also leave something relevant for all of you to think about in your business. And why it is challenging is because, every year I have to think about what new to say, because usually the fundamentals about things remain the same. But, for aspire, upgrade and multiply, I'm probably in the upgrade area for you in terms of new information or new understanding or new perspective about retirement and how to think about it. Why is it so challenging and what can one do about it? We are in this beautiful hall of IIT Madras, started in 1959 with financial assistance and technical assistance from Germany. And today when you look at the National Institutional Ranking Framework, IIT Madras ranks number 1. And it ranks number 1 for a reason, that it is not just holistic education that it imparts, but it's also the best in research. And the reason I point that out is because for me and my team, one of the things that we keep discussing is that when we talk to our advisors, can we talk from a position of research, from a position of evidence, from a position of proof? Or are we just giving gyan, which almost everybody can read and listen to on podcasts and stuff? But where's the evidence? What's the research? And whatever we say and whatever we do, can we use research and evidence? So my topic today, as you can see up on the screen, is financial freedom and its missing link. But I'm sure that the topic that you saw in your agenda was something I'm sure that intrigued all of you to say, what the hell is he going to speak about dancing with my granddaughter at her wedding? It will become apparent to most people by the end of the presentation, and I hope. But I want to do few things quick, which is context setting. In a lot of things when we think about various topics, it's important to set some context. And let me start with setting a context about our profession and about the evolution of our profession. Some of you would have heard this before, but I still want to take you through it. The way that our profession started was in 1917, when the investor class was born, when the US issued war bonds to fund its First World War efforts. And that's when the investor class, as we know as individuals investing, you could put a milestone on it in 1917, because before that it was largely high net worth individuals who could buy land or gold or whatever it is. And now you had an investor class buying financial instruments. And then in 1924, in the Massachusetts Investment Trust, which is a mutual fund house, Edward Leffler invented the first mutual fund, which is putting a portfolio of equities together in a unitized form, giving it an NAV, and that's how mutual funds as a concept actually started in 1924. 1952 is when Harry Markowitz, who went on to win the Nobel Prize, wrote his seminal paper called Portfolio Theory. And if each one of us in this room needs to find a grandfather for a profession, that's the man. Because he gave us asset allocation. He gave us mixing assets in a proportion so that you can reduce risk and increase returns at the same time. Optimizing portfolios came from this portfolio theory. And then in the same period, in the 1960s, you had William Sharpe, who came up with the capital asset pricing model. In the 70s, you had Eugene Fama, who came up with the efficient market theory. Both of these theories are probably familiar to you, but more familiar would be Sharpe ratio and Fama ratio. These are the people who put up these theories. And today, when we talk about fund managers and advisors managing portfolios from a technical point of view, these are the three theories: the portfolio theory, the capital asset pricing model, and the efficient market theory that actually is backing up the science of portfolio management. And then, of course, as you look at the evolution of our profession, you had William Faust at Wells Fargo, who started indexing. 1992 is when Morningstar launched the Style Box And that's when, as an industry, we started knowing what is a growth fund, what is a value fund, what is a quality fund, so on and so forth. That comes from the Morningstar Style Box, which got launched in 1992. Then we had ETFs in 1993, which Nate Moss started in Amex. So if you see some of the key things that we think about our profession, setting a context for us, this is how the evolution of our industry has happened. And then the more important part, which I am sort of more appreciative about, is Daniel Kahneman winning the Nobel Prize for Behavioral Economics in 2002, and Richard Thaler following that up with the Nobel Prize in 2017 for the same subject, behavioral economics. You have people now like Neer Statman, who's taking behavioral economics into a second phase. Why am I talking about this? Because if you look at the time period from all of what you see here, this was when the world believed that human beings are rational, human beings are economic animals. If you throw numbers at them, if you throw choices at them, they will make the right choice. And the difference is that this particular segment of people, and let me go back there for a second. Yeah. This particular set of people are basically saying that people don't invest because of numbers. People invest because of their emotions. It is psychology that is more important than numbers. As you heard Anthony speak about it, it's about controlling behavior. It's about nudging behavior. It's about psychology. The most successful advisors, the most successful financial firms in the business are operating in that red box in a big sense. I can tell you from experience of meeting MFDs and advisors across India that 95% of people are operating on this side, thinking about the numbers, where the market's headed, what's happened to the market, what returns in 3, 6, 3 years, 5 years, what about fund performances, all about numbers, thinking if we put those numbers, we will look more better with clients, and we have to know it. Of course you got to know it. But what is more important to build on our advisory practice, to scale our business, is to also understand the science of psychology, the science of behavior, and do something about it. Now, Daniel is in a different emotional state than you, so he's able to objectively look at what your goals actually require. That's at the heart of what actually advisors bring to the table. Now, I'm going to take this forward from here, and I want to actually, as I said, the challenge of the subject of retirement is there's so much to it. But for this audience, I wouldn't do this presentation to a typical MFD audience. This is Ifpa. Most of you are evolved, have the experience, and aspire to more knowledge, to know what is cutting edge, what are experts saying, how can we think differently about the same subject. So there has to be some appreciation for evolutionary biology and cognitive science. So let me tell you, and I'll make it as simple as I can, and you look at this picture. No other species on Earth have it. Our experience has developed a neocortex, and this analyze, it's the neocortex that thinks of self-preservation, and it also does analysis. This is how we have survived and thrived as a species compared to all other species. A very different part of the brain, a very amphibian, mammalian part of the brain, is what we use when we think about others. So the neocortex is about self-preservation, but the old brain still kicks in when you're thinking about others, when you're thinking about who's a stranger, because immediately you're thinking, is this guy? It's so difficult. Because it's difficult for the human brain to perceive it. The industry is really difficult to process that. This, in one slide, is evolutionary biology and cognitive science put together to tell you why is retirement selling so difficult. Because the brain can't perceive your future self so easily. It believes it's a stranger. It believes the person who's going to benefit out of that long-term investing is not the same person today. Therefore, have from this as a conclusion in a more simpler way is that human behavior is dependent on things that are risks that you can see, feel, and touch or hear. Your senses need to be. Evolutionarily, however, humans are hardwired and motivated by rewards in the present. And therefore, things like climate change, where you can't see our daily lives because we just can't perceive this. This is too distant. That is the importance of evolutionary bias. 17, and he gives you a simple framework. Be a choice architect. If you can think about this word, about what does it mean to be a choice architect? Where do you see choice architecture at work today in your life? You go to a library, into fiction, non-fiction, history, comics, whatever it is, and not left all the books in a store to say, here's a bookstore, come buy. But it's organized. It is organized in a context. The buffet outside for your client in terms of the decisions that you want them to take for what they want. So what does being a choice architect mean? Well, the actual definition of being a choice architect is one who has the responsibility of organizing the context in which decisions are made. And why, therefore, would becoming a choice architect become difficult for an advisor compared to something like a supermarket or a library or something else? And there is actual evidence and research that when it comes to financial goal planning and decision making, it's very difficult to become that choice architect, which makes our jobs difficult because we are asking them to put the SIPs now, the benefits will come later. It's not like going to a restaurant and the food coming warm and with a beautiful smell in front of you immediately on ordering. The reason why they're different is because of the context in which they grew up. Somebody grew up in the context of just after the First World War when their parents told them, make love, not war, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna. You know, it was peace. And then you had the US and Starbucks and McDonald's and capitalism, and then you had flights that you could take easily, globalization. Then you see the digital world, kids being born with mobile phones now they have in the hand. They've never seen a remote or a dial telephone and things like that. And then you have a post-COVID generation as well. The first generation, very idealistic. The second generation, very materialistic. The third generation, quite self-centered. Fourth generation wants to always have things which are unique for them. And the fifth generation, very, very opinionated. It is said that Gen A, while you might decide to buy a car, that the car should have a sunroof is decided by that generation. Right? So a lot of decision making is done by people here. What does this generational context that I've presented before mean for advisors? And that's the big conclusion I had when I did that presentation. Please remember, you can only sell to the generation you belong to. Don't even try if you're a 60-year-old advisor to try and convince the 25-year-old that they shouldn't put money in Bitcoin. They're going to say, yes, uncle, but then they're going to put 50% of the money in Bitcoin and never tell you. Even if they made a loss, they will never tell you. So all your good intentions are of no use. And if you're a 30-year-old MFD trying to convince a 70-year-old to part with their money, you may be able to, but it's not easy. He's probably giving it saying, "Acha bachha hai, de do." Right, ladies and gentlemen, my picture of my future is dancing with my granddaughter at the wedding. So thank you very much. I hope you